Hello and welcome to the Invent with Scratch Screencast. I'm Al Swigert, and in this episode we're going to create a UFO Asteroids game where you have to pilot this little UFO around and shoot out little laser bursts and try to avoid hitting any of these asteroids. So you use the mouse to aim where you want to fire and then the space key to fire, and you use the WASD keys to pilot the UFO, and you can wrap around the screen, so if you go off the right edge you appear on the left edge, and the asteroids do the same thing, as well as your little bullets that you shoot out. And so you lose a point every second, but you can gain points by hitting the asteroids, so you're in this constant race to keep shooting as many of these asteroids, and new ones keep appearing all the time. Whoop! And try to get the highest score possible by the time you lose. So let's go ahead and click on Create, and that will open up a brand new Scratch editor. And the first thing we're going to do is we don't need this cat, so we can right click on the cat sprite and select Delete from here, or we can right click on the sprite in this sprite area and select Delete from there. Instead of drawing our own UFO and asteroids, I'm just going to download ones that I've posted on the inventwithscratch.com website. Here on the downloads page, there's a whole bunch of graphics that are used in various games, and we're just going to download these. The UFO, so right click on that and select Save Image As, and I'm just going to select the desktop as where I want to save them. And so I will just name this UFO.png. And then do the same thing with the asteroid, and then the same thing with all 8 of these explosion animation graphics. So now let's go back to the original screen, and I'm going to click on this button right here that says Upload Sprite from File. So the image files that I've just downloaded, I can now upload into Scratch, and I'll select UFO.png for the first one. So this is pretty good. It's kind of weird that we have this completely blank white background, so I'm going to change that too. Scratch comes with a whole bunch of these backdrops, so I'm going to select the stage and then go to Backdrops, which is sort of the Costumes tab of the stage, whereas all the sprites have their own Costumes tab right here. But on the Backdrops tab, I'm going to click on this image one that says Choose Backdrop from Library. And Scratch comes with a whole bunch of backgrounds that you can use. I'm going to select the space theme, and then pick this one that says Stars. Okay, now let's start adding the code to this UFO. So at the very start of the game, we're always going to have the UFO start at the very center here, where the X and Y coordinates are both 0. Remember, in Cartesian coordinates, the X number is the left and right sort of address of where it is. So it starts off 0 in the center, and increases going to the right, and decreases going to the left. It becomes a negative number to the left. And the Y address, or Y coordinate, is the up-down direction. So it increases going up and decreases and becomes negative going down. So we're going to have, let's start off at the brown events category, grab this when the green flag is clicked, and have the UFO just go to the very center. So in the dark blue motion category, there's a block here that says go to X, Y, and we can change these numbers. I'll just type in 0 and 0. So that'll have it so that whenever the player clicks on the green flag and starts the program, it just starts off and goes to 0. And that's all it does so far. It just, when the green flag is clicked, go to 0, 0, which is the center of the stage, and then there's nothing else after that. So we're just going to keep adding more blocks and more code and fill out the entire behavior of how this UFO should act. So in the original game, you can see once the UFO explodes and it's game over, it also hides itself. Like right now, UFO picture is gone. So we're going to, just in case it's hidden from the last game, we need to add this show block from the purple look section here. And then after that, we're going to start creating some variables in the orange data section. So go ahead and click on Make a Variable, and the first variable we're going to make is called Score, and this variable will just store the number that is the current score. So make sure that for all sprites is checked, and click OK. Since once score is 0, the game will be over because the score is constantly dropping by 1 every second that the player stands around. So that just prevents the player from just being able to like stay perfectly still and ignore the asteroids, because once these start getting really small and tiny they're all over this place, the game gets a lot harder. So we want to force the player to actually, you know, keep shooting asteroids to get points to keep the score from dropping to 0. We don't want the score to start off at 0 at the very beginning, so I'm going to grab this set score block. We'll just set score to 10. And next we want to create some variables that say what the x and y velocity of the UFO is. So in this game, we're not going to have the arrow keys or the WASD keys like directly control where this UFO goes. Instead, it's sort of like if you push on the D key or the right arrow key, it starts pushing the UFO in the right direction, and it'll keep going at that same speed until you start pushing in the opposite direction by pressing the left arrow or the A key. In order to do that, we're going to have two variables. Click on Make a Variable, and we'll call the first one X velocity. And here's a really important point. Don't miss this. Make sure that for this sprite only is checked. Otherwise, you're going to have weird bugs. And click OK. And you'll be able to tell that this is a for this sprite only, you know, for the UFO sprite only variable, if it says the sprite's name before the variable name. So score is for all sprites, so it just says score, but X velocity is a UFO sprite specific variable. It's for that sprite only. And then do the same thing, click on Make a Variable, except the second one will be called Y velocity. And this will be for this sprite only as well. And at the very start of the game, we don't want the UFO moving around, so we're just going to set both of those, both X velocity and Y velocity, to 0. So set X velocity to 0, grab another block that says set Y velocity to 0. After this, let's go ahead and go to the yellow control section and grab a forever loop. Here's where this game will constantly be running the code inside here, and we'll be checking if the player is holding down one of the keyboard keys and then moving the UFO around. What we want this code to check for is if the player is holding down a certain key. So we can actually grab this if block from the yellow control section, and then go to light blue sensing, grab this key space pressed, and just snap it into the hexagon slot right there. So I'm going to be using the WASD keys, that is the WASD keys, because that's sort of like the arrow keys that you can use except with your left hand, since the arrow key buttons are on the right side of the keyboard. So I'm going to just set up the Y key first, or I'm sorry, the W key. If the W key is being pressed, we want this spaceship to start moving up. Remember, we're not moving the UFO sprite directly. Instead, we're just going to increase the Y velocity variable. Just increase the number that's stored in this variable, let's say by maybe 0.5. So go to the orange data section. This time grab the change variable, not the set one, but the change variable. We're going to change Y velocity by 0.5. So if we click on the green flag, you can see if I press on the W key, it starts increasing the Y velocity quite a bit actually. But it doesn't actually move the UFO because we haven't added any code that changes the position. What we can do is go to the, well, click stop first, and go to the dark blue motion category, and maybe grab this change Y by. This will change the Y position of the UFO. And we don't want it to just change Y by 10 each time. We just want it to change by whatever the Y velocity variable is set to. So the very start of the program, remember, when the green flag is clicked, Y velocity is set to 0, so it won't actually be doing anything. I mean, it's changing Y by 0, but 0 is nothing, that's no movement. But now, if I hit the W key, that will increase Y velocity by 0.5. And then, since y velocity will now be greater than 0, it'll start moving. So I can hit the W key a little bit, and yeah, now it's at 3 and it's just moving up. And eventually once it hits the top of the screen, Scratch will keep it from moving up anymore. I can actually pick it up with the mouse when I'm in the editor, and it'll just be moving up. And I can just keep holding down the W key and it'll just move up even faster and faster. I'm going to set this block off to the side real quick, so that way I can do this special trick, which is right-clicking on this if block and selecting duplicate, which will duplicate everything beneath it, but I don't want to duplicate this part, so I just moved it off to the side for a bit. I'm going to duplicate that, and now we can just set up the S key to move down. We have to make some changes though. It's not going to be the exact copy of this. For one thing, we're going to check if the S key is being held down. And if so, we want the y velocity to move downwards, so we're going to change this to negative 0.5. And then we want to do the same thing with the A and D keys, except moving left and right instead of up and down. So I'm going to, once again, right-click on this if block and select duplicate. That'll give me all these blocks. I'll just paste them in right there. Scroll down a bit. I'll change this to D. We want to move right, so actually we want to change the x velocity variable by positive 0.5, and then change the other if block so that when the A key is pressed, it's changing the x velocity by negative 0.5. If your program starts acting strangely, make sure that you have all of these set up. You need to have the correct key set up for each of these and the correct variable, and also make sure that you have the correct positive or negative number set up. So, and we can just put this back into place. In fact, we'll also want to go back to the dark blue motion category, grab another change X block. I'll just stick that in there, and then go back to the orange data section to grab this X velocity variable. So this is sort of basically whatever number is currently inside the x velocity variable is what this will change x by, and same goes for y velocity right here. We can test this out. Click on the green flag, and you can see right now it's not doing anything, and we can see right here x velocity and y velocity are both set to 0. So these two blocks are being run by Scratch. It's just that when you change x by 0, it doesn't move at all. Same goes for y. Remember, the x velocity and y velocity variables were set to 0 at the very start of the program. But now, once I hit, say, the D key, that will start changing x by a positive 0.5 each time I hold it down. And then I can also hold down the A key to have it move in a change by a negative amount. So you can see I'm moving, and then I can hold down the A key, and that'll start decreasing the x velocity until it slows down, and eventually if I keep pressing A enough, it'll start going in the opposite direction. So this is kind of nice. It's sort of like a, I don't know, it feels like you're sort of moving a hockey puck on ice almost. So the one thing we want to do now is add some code that will check if the UFO sprite is over on the right edge, and if so, we want it to appear on the left edge. And then the same goes for if it's over on the left edge, appear on the right edge, and also up and down. So that'll allow it to look like it's just doing this wraparound that we can see it doing right here. I'm going to scroll down here. What we basically want to do is inside this forever loop, as well as having Scratch check if all of these keys are being held down and also changing x and y by whatever velocity, we also want to check if the UFO's x position is ever so far on the right that we want it to start wrapping around. So we can do that by, you can see right here, this x and y shows the x and y coordinates of wherever the mouse is. So this is a handy way of seeing what the coordinates of any place on the stage is. So you can see if I move the mouse all the way to the right, the maximum x value is 240. You can see right there, 240. And then if I move it to the left, the smallest x value is negative 240. And then y is positive 180 and negative 180. So we'll just keep that in mind. Let's say if if the x position is ever, I don't know, greater than positive 235, then we'll change the x position to be over here. Let's go to the yellow control section. I'm going to grab an if block. I need to know if the x position of the UFO is greater than 235. So first I'm going to go to the dark blue motion category and grab this x position. Kind of looks like a variable, but this is set to whatever the x position of the UFO is, which you can also see is always also going to be right here. So right now the x position of this UFO is negative 49. If I move it over to the right, it starts getting bigger. So x position, well, this actually doesn't fit in there because this is a hexagon slot and this is a circular oval-shaped bubble. What we really want is going to the operator section first, then grabbing this greater than, which you can see from has this little angle right here. It'll fit inside this slot. So right there, and then put this in there. So if x position of the UFO is greater than 235, we want it to appear on the other side, and that really means we just want to change the x position to be over here at, say, negative 235. So I'm going to go to the dark blue motion category. I'm going to grab this set x and snap it into place and just say if x position is greater than 235, I want to set the x position to negative 235. I'm going to test this out. I'm going to click on the green flag and move to the right. And hey, that works. That's pretty good. So it doesn't work for the other directions yet, but we'll just have to add that code in. So we can do the same thing. We can right-click here and select duplicate, just like we did with the arrow keys, or the directional keys. Except here, we can change this to less than by right-clicking on it and selecting less than. So if x position is less than negative 235, that is, if it's over on the left side of the screen, we want to set x position to positive 235. And then I'll just duplicate this, and also do this for the y position as well, which we're going to get rid of these x position bubbles and replace them with y position. Remember, the maximum y position was 180 and negative 180, so I'm going to change this number to say if it's greater than 175, or if it's less than 175, negative 175, and we need to swap these out for set y blocks. So I'm going to get rid of that and get rid of that. Instead, pop in set y to, let's see, negative 175 here and 175 here. So you can see these if blocks are always being checked constantly by Scratch. So Scratch starts off right here, checks, oh, is W key being pressed? No, it skips that, and it checks all these, and it changes X and Y by whatever is in X velocity and Y velocity. Right now it's 0, so it's not changing it at all. And then it's also checking, oh, if X position or Y position is on the either edge, it'll change their X and Y to wrap around. So, and it's constantly just going in this loop forever, constantly checking. So now I'm just moving, you can see it's running the change X by block. And then once the UFO gets far enough to the right, then this condition becomes true, so it runs this set X to negative 235. And you can see that happens. Oh, it's still skipping it, skipping it, skipping it. Oh, it turned out to be true, so it changed X. And then we can also just check all the other directions as well. Okay, that's working out pretty nice. So let's go ahead and make the little energy balls that shoot out of the UFO. You can see whenever I press the space key, in this one it fires. First, I'm going to click on this button again, Upload Sprite from... Oh wait, no, Scratch comes with the energy ball one, so I'll click on this one that says Choose Sprite from Library, and it's this one, just called Ball. And whoa, that's pretty huge. So one of the first things that we're going to have done, let's go to the Brown Events category first. Grab this when green flag is clicked. So the first thing when the green flag is clicked, we're going to shrink this down. So go to the looks category, and where is it? It should be like set size. Here we go. Set size, we'll just say 10% of its original size. So yeah, right there. Also, the ball sprite comes with several different costumes, so you can change the color if you want to have a different little energy blast coming out of the UFO. I'm just going to leave it at the yellow-orangey color. Right now, all this energy ball is doing is just sitting there. We don't really want it to do that. Really, actually, we don't even want it to appear on the screen at all, because while the UFO is flying around, it shouldn't just be hanging out right there. But the second thing it should do is hide itself right after the game starts. And now we're going to start using the clone blocks to produce tons of these, because right now we only have one sprite on the screen, whereas in the original game, you can see we can fire out a ton of these. And I'll show you how we did that. Let's go ahead and grab from the brown events category, grab this when space key is pressed. And the only block that we're going to have under here, so every time the space key is pressed, the only block we'll have is from the yellow control section. We'll have it be create clone of myself. So it basically just creates a whole bunch of clones, which right now doesn't do anything when I hit the space key. I mean, it's created a whole bunch of clones, but they're all still hidden because the original sprite was hidden too, so you can't see any of those clones. So really we need to have something that, you know, when it first starts as a clone, so here in the yellow control section, grab this when I start as a clone, each of these clones needs to do the following things. First, we're going to have it move to wherever the UFO is. So in the dark blue motion category, grab this go to block, and I'll change that to UFO. Second, we're going to have it point towards wherever the mouse cursor is right now, and that's how we're aiming where these little energy balls go. So we're going to grab this point towards block as well, and set that to mouse pointer. And then third, we're just going to have them show up. So that'll be in the purple looks category. We can grab this show block. So we haven't really implemented it that much yet, but you can sort of see every time I hit a space key, we're creating new clones. Of course, they're not moving around or anything. We need to add the code that does that. I'm going to grab from the dark blue motion category, we're going to have this sort of move 10 steps block, but that'll only move it 10 steps once. We sort of want it to move 10 steps a whole bunch of times, but I don't want to keep putting all of these move 10 step blocks everywhere. So instead, let's just go to the yellow control section and grab this repeat block and change this to 50 times. Repeat 50 times, and then put the motion, the dark blue motion block of move 10 steps inside there. That's pretty good. Now, you can see, it starts moving around. So in the original game, the little energy balls would also wrap around the screen, kind of like the UFO does, but they don't do that here because we haven't added that code yet. And we also don't want them to just hang around after they are done moving. Let's stop that. Let's go back to the yellow control section. After they're done moving 10 steps forward, let's just grab this delete this clone block. So every time I press the space key, a clone is created of this energy ball sprite. And each of the clones will run all of these blocks. They'll go to the UFO, they'll point themselves where the mouse direction is, and then show themselves, and then start moving 10 steps in that direction that they're pointed in, which is towards wherever the mouse pointer was at the time. And after they're done repeating this, after they do move 10 steps 50 times, they'll delete themselves. So you can see that's exactly what happens. Eventually they stop moving around and then just delete themselves. Let's also start adding the wraparound code that the UFO has, kind of where I can just move around. So we could start, you know, copying all those, or pulling all those blocks here, but let's just go to the UFO sprite, and let's see, we've already made all of those blocks right here, so what we can do is grab this top if block. You want the ones with the X position and Y position bubbles, not the ones up here with the key pressed. But grab this top of the if blocks and then just drag it over the ball sprite. And when you let go, all of those blocks will snap back into their original position, so you haven't moved them or anything. But when you click on the ball sprite now, that code has now been copied here. We can pick it up and just move it inside that repeat 50. So now not only is it moving 10 steps, but it's also checking if it's ever on the left or edge, right or top or bottom edge of the screen and then wraps around. That's pretty nice. Okay, let's start making the asteroids now. We have the UFO, we have the energy ball. Now I'm going to click on Upload Sprite from File. I'm going to select that asteroid.png image file that I downloaded before. And so this is the asteroid. So the asteroid is pretty simple. We always want it to start off somewhere randomly on the left edge of the screen. So the X position will be sort of -235 here on the left edge, but the Y position will be something random, somewhere between -180 and +180. So let's go to Events and grab this when green flag is clicked. And also at the very start of the program, we're also going to start creating clones of this asteroid because we can have more than one asteroid appear on the screen at the same time. So the original asteroid sprite we're just going to have hidden. Let's just grab a hide block from the purple look section. So this asteroid will start off as hidden, and also the asteroid changes its size whenever it's hit. Whoop. Let me try that again. So you can see this asteroid has a variety of sizes that it changes to. So we want the original sprite to be set at 100%, its original normal size at the very start of the game. And then we're going to create a new variable. Go to the orange data section, click on Make a Variable, and we're going to make a variable that keeps track of how many times this asteroid can be hit before it completely vanishes. So each time it gets hit, it creates two smaller little rocks, but eventually, once the rocks become small enough, they just disappear on their own. So I'm going to call this variable hits. And here's also a really important part. Make sure that you have for this sprite only clicked. At the very start of the game, I'm just going to have hits set to 4. So now we're going to have this forever loop. Just like how we have this original ball sprite create clones of itself, and then those clones start shooting themselves out, this original asteroid sprite is going to do nothing but sort of create copies of itself that start off on the left edge, all with random velocities. So first, let's go to some random place on the left edge of the screen. So in the dark blue motion category, we can grab this go to X and Y. We'll always have it be, -235, and then the Y value, we want it to be randomly anywhere in between positive, let's say 175 and -175. So in the green operator section, grab this pick random. We'll just change this to -175 to 175. So right now, if we click on the green flag, oh, well, it's hidden, so we can't really see it, but just for debugging purposes, I'm going to temporarily add this show block here just to cancel out this hide block. You can see, oh, it's just, because all it's ever doing is just changing its X and Y value. It's always going to be somewhere here at -235x, which is on the left side. It's also changing itself around there. Ooh, don't want that. We also want it to start creating clones of itself. So in the yellow control section, grab this create clone of myself. And we don't want it to quickly make too many clones like this. Whoa, that'd be way too many asteroids. So let's just have it wait for a small period of time after creating a clone of itself. So after waiting 1 second, it will go back to the top, find a new random position to go to, and then create another clone of itself. In fact, 1 second might still be too frequently. Could have it be 10 seconds. That's a pretty good amount of time. But let's go ahead and in the green operator section, grab another pick random block, and let's just, to make it more random, have it be between anywhere from 8 to 12 seconds. It'll create a brand new clone of itself. So you can see once I click the green flag, it'll wait some random amount of time, anywhere between 8 and 12 seconds, and then move to a brand new location and then create a clone of itself there. So there's a clone here, and also a clone here where also the original sprite is, because the clones always get generated at the exact same position, so it's currently on top of it. Oh, and then it created another clone right here, and that's pretty good. Let's have these clones start moving around. I'm going to move this code off to the side. When an asteroid starts off as a clone, we're going to grab this when I start as a clone block. So we want it to do a few different things. First of all, we want it to check if its hits variable, which we set to 4 right here, is set to 0, and in that case it can't take any more hits and the clone should just delete itself. So I'm going to grab this if, grab this equal block from the green operator section, and go to data, grab this hits variable. In fact, I'm going to uncheck this because all of these variables are taking up a lot of space on the stage, so I'll hide that. Go to the UFO and also hide that. So anyway, if hits is equal to 0, then back to the yellow control section, we'll grab delete this clone. And I'll show you later, you'll see how the hits variable starts decreasing it, because we'll have a change hits by -1 block. And eventually once it gets down to 0, these asteroids will start disappearing and deleting themselves. But anyway, if it solves that check, if hits isn't 0, it's some number greater than 0, then what we want it to do is start giving itself a random position, or I'm sorry, a random velocity and a random rotation. First, we also want it to show itself, so we don't want this show block here anymore. We do need one right there. I just had that here so that you could see that little example of when it started creating clones of itself. And now we want to create some variables, just like we had for the UFO, for x velocity and y velocity. So click on the orange data section and then make a variable. We'll call this x velocity and make it for this sprite only. And notice how this asteroid's x velocity variable, that's a separate variable from the UFO's x velocity variable. You can see there are two different ones, even though they have the same name. But they can each have their own values. Like right now, me pressing down on the WASD keys changes the x velocity for UFO, but not for asteroid. And then I'm going to make another variable called y velocity, and also for this sprite only. And then I'm going to make a third variable, and we'll call it rotation, and make it for this sprite only. And this is really important. You can see in the original game, these asteroids kind of rotate slowly around. It gives them this sort of graceful floating through space look. So we want to have the rotation variable also set randomly for that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to need 3 of these set variable blocks. And we're going to need to set x velocity to some random number, and y velocity to some random number, and rotation to some random number. We could just go to the operators section and grab this pick random 1 to 10, maybe anywhere between -3, so it could move to the left, and +3. Now we could have this, but this isn't really ideal. And I'll show you why. This pick random -3 to 3, it always generates positive total whole number integers, so something like -3 or -2 or -1 or 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. But these are not really fine-grained numbers. I mean, it'd be nice if we could have the velocity be something like 1.7 or 2.3. But we can't get that with just this pick random -3 to 3. It's always going to be these whole numbers. So instead, what we can do is this. I'm just going to pluck this out temporarily and change this to -30 to +30, and then grab this division block right here, set that inside there. So I take the random number and then I divide it by 10. And what this does is now that pick random -30 to 30 will return a whole integer number like -30 or -29 or -28, all the way up to, -1, 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 29 or 30. But since we have this divide by 10 right here, the actual number that's going to evaluate from this entire block will be, something like -30 divided by 10, which will be -3.0, which is the same as what we'd have here. But if it was -29 divided by 10, that would be -2.9, and so forth. So we can have, because of that divide by 10, we can have like -2.8 or -1.0, all the way up to 2.9 or 3.0. So we're going to get a lot finer grained numbers this way by adding that divide by 10. We won't just have -3, -2. So there's kind of a big jump between 2 and 3, whereas you could have a smaller variation, a much finer variation by having these fractional numbers. So I'm going to put that for x velocity, and then I'll just right-click and hit duplicate, set it to y velocity, and also for rotation as well. Now, after we've set up the initial variables, we're going to have our forever loop. And in here, we also want the asteroid to just be moving by this x velocity, y velocity, and rotation, just like we had the UFOs change by that amount right here, change x by x velocity, change y by y velocity. So go to the dark blue motion category. I'm going to grab this change x by and change y by. And we can just put the x velocity and y velocity variables in there. But also, because we have this rotation, let's go to the dark blue motion category, grab this turn by whatever degrees, and then put the rotation number inside there. It doesn't matter if you grab the turn right or turn left one block, because rotation can be negative or positive. So if it's negative, it'll just turn in the opposite direction. So let's go ahead and click on the green flag, and there we go. Oh, well, the asteroid doesn't wrap around yet, so let's try that again. Oh yeah, you can see it's always moving in some random direction and sort of rotating. Let's go ahead and, just like we did for the ball sprite, let's copy that wraparound code by dragging it over the asteroid sprite. So once we have it here, we can just plug it in underneath. And now the asteroid will also wrap around. And you can see it's slowly rotating as well. Or here we have it quickly rotating, but its x velocity is pretty slow, and its y velocity is a little bit bigger, so it's moving more vertically than horizontally. Oh yeah, and then occasionally it starts creating clones of itself because of this code right here. Once it's done waiting, it goes back to the top and creates another clone of itself. So right now, we can't actually shoot any of these asteroids, and also the asteroids don't damage the UFO, so let's add that code next. So what we want to have happen is, inside this forever loop, it should have another if block from the yellow control category. And what this checks is if the asteroid sprite is ever touching any of the ball sprite clones. And remember, this code applies to all of the asteroid clones and all of the ball clones. So if this asteroid clone is ever touching, and we can find that in the light blue sensing category, grab this touching block. If it's ever touching a ball sprite, then we want it to do that split up into two smaller pieces, like right there. The first thing that we're going to do is actually go to this brown events category, we also want the ball to erase itself, so the ball doesn't keep going through after it's hit the asteroid. It disappears as soon as it touches an asteroid. So we need to broadcast an event to tell that clone to delete itself. So in the brown events category, grab this one, broadcast and wait. You don't want to have broadcast, let's have broadcast and wait. And I'm going to click on the black triangle and create a new message to broadcast. We'll just call it erase ball. We'll also have the ball sprite just be listening for that message. So grab this when I receive, and it'll be set to erase ball, or if not, then you can just select it from here. So when I receive, when any of the ball clone sprites receives that erase ball, first of all, we don't want them all to disappear. We only want the one that's touching an asteroid to disappear. So let's go to the yellow control section and grab this if block. And then from light blue sensing, grab touching. If it's touching an asteroid, then it should just delete itself. And that's in the yellow control section. Grab this delete this clone. So now when we test this out, so it doesn't break up the asteroid anymore, but at least the ball clones know that they should delete themselves because the asteroid's always checking to see if it's touching a ball, and if so, it broadcasts this message, and then this code starts running where all of the ball clones start checking if they're touching an asteroid, and if so, they delete themselves. So right here, at this point, if you remember that old hits variable that we have set up, it's originally set to 4, and if a clone ever gets created where it's set to 0, it deletes itself. So right now, we'll just change that by -1. Let's change hits by -1. Let's give the player a couple points whenever they hit an asteroid. So we'll also change the score. Let's say add 2 to the score. So remember, every single clone will have its own hits variable. The very first sprite starts off with its hits set to 4, and when it creates clones, the clones have separate hits variables, but those hits variables will start off at the same value as the sprite that's creating that clone. So we want to subtract 1 from hits first, and then create 2 new clones. Well, actually, even before that, we want to shrink down this asteroid. There we go. Change size by -25. So remember, this is still that asteroid that's being shot. First, it decreases its own hits variable by -1, and then changes its size by -25. And not because we're going to have it stick around. In fact, we're going to delete it pretty soon. Let's go to the yellow control section and grab this delete this clone. But we want it to change itself so that way when it creates new clones of itself, those new clones will have a hits variable value of, 1 less than the original one had. Actually, let's go ahead and add these 2 create clones. This asteroid changes itself by decreasing its hits variables and changing its size, so that way when it clones itself, these 2 clones will start off with those same hits and sizes, and then the original asteroid deletes itself. We can go ahead and click on the green flag right here, and now, whenever I hit it, you can see these 2 clones have been created, and they're a little bit smaller, and these asteroids will have hits variables that are set to 3. And when I hit that one, it creates 2 new ones, and these are set to 2. The hits variable is set to 2, and now these tiny ones, have their hits variable set to 1. Ooh, this is getting really crowded. And when I hit them one last time, they disappear because they'll still change their hits variable down to 0 and create 2 new clones. But those 2 clones, when they start, they check, oh hey, is my hits set to 0? And oh, if so, then just delete themselves. So we never even see them. Ooh, this is getting really crowded here with all these asteroid clones everywhere. Every time I keep shooting, I'm just making more and more of them. Whoa. So that's pretty good. Obviously, I was able to survive all of that because we haven't added the code where these asteroids can crash into the UFO. So let's do that next. Let's go back to the UFO sprite. And down here, inside the forever loop, let's add one more if block. And this one will check if it's touching an asteroid. We can go to the light blue sensing category and grab this touching block. Say if it's touching asteroid. This condition will be true if it's touching any of those asteroid clones, so it applies to all the asteroid pieces that are floating around. And if so, then first we're going to have the UFO hide itself, so it looks like the UFO disappears. And then we're going to broadcast a new message that will tell a second explosion animation to appear and play out its little explosion animation. So we'll do that with a broadcast. So go to the Brown Events category, grab this broadcast and wait. Set it to a new message. We'll just say broadcast the message explode. We're going to use those explosion graphics that we downloaded before. So I'm going to click on Upload Sprite from File, and I'm going to select Explosion 1. I'll click on this eye to just change the name of the sprite to Explosion. Go to its costumes. We don't want to create a separate sprite for each of those explosions. Instead, we'll just have one sprite called Explosion and create several different costumes for it. We can do that by clicking on the Upload Costume from File, and then selecting Explosion 2, and here's a trick to upload all of them at the same time. If I hold down the Shift key when I click on the last one, it'll select all of them. Otherwise, you can just repeatedly upload a new costume sprite until you have all 8 costumes uploaded. The ordering might be a little bit messed up. You want it to be Explosion 1, Explosion 2, Explosion 3, so I'm just going to reorder these around. Okay, so I have Explosion 1, Explosion 2, Explosion 3, 4, 5. Having this be in the right order is important because we're going to call the next costume block to do all of these explosions. So let's go to the explosions script area. Just like the energy balls, we don't want this explosion visible at the very start of the game. So when the green flag is clicked, the first thing the explosion sprite will do is hide itself. And then it'll just keep hidden and waiting around until finally it receives that explode message. So when I receive, I'll change this to explode. So remember, the UFO sprite will broadcast that message once it's touching an asteroid. When the explode message is received, first we'll go to the dark blue motion category, and just like the energy balls appear to start from the UFO because they went to the UFO first, we'll grab this go to block and set it to UFO, and then we'll make the explosion appear. Well, actually, first thing we want to do is make sure that it's set to costume 1. So grab this switch costume from the purple look section and set it to explosion 1, and then we'll have it appear and show itself. So now we want it to run these next costume sprites, so that's how it'll go from explosion 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and so it looks like it's exploding. So we need 7 of these next costume sprites, except that's a kind of a lot of blocks that we're going to have right here. We don't want to do that. Instead, let's go to the yellow control section and grab that repeat block, and just change this to repeat 7, and then put 1 next costume block inside there. Go ahead and see what happens. So, bam! Oh, hey, that's pretty cool. So you can see as soon as the UFO detected that it was touching an asteroid sprite, it disappeared, and then also broadcasted that explode message, which was received by this sprite here. So it moved itself to wherever the UFO was, switched to costume 1, which is the first part of the explosion. It made itself visible by showing itself, and then it just went through all those next costumes, which did this animation. But it did that really fast. I mean, you can see right here, boom, all of that just happened. So that's pretty good. Let's see. There's a little bit of smoke afterwards, so we want it to hide itself after that. And then, let's just have it end the game. Let's see, from the UFO Sprite. This is going to broadcast that explosion message and then wait for all of this to be done. And after that's done, we'll just have the UFO stop everything. So go to the yellow control category and grab this stop all block. And this will terminate the program. It's sort of the programmatic way of clicking on the red stop sign button. Let's test that out, and bam. And then all the clones disappeared because the stop button was basically clicked by this block. So that's kind of sudden, though. It'd be nice if we could just sort of see, like in the original game, the game keeps moving on for just a couple seconds so the player can realize, oh, I just crashed, and then it stops. So let's go back to that explosion sprite, and in the yellow control category, let's grab this wait block and stick it on the very end, and just have it wait a couple seconds. So now you can see, once the UFO gets hit, there's like a 2-second pause before where the asteroids are still floating around because their code is still executing. And then finally after that 2-second pause, then the UFO sprite stops everything. So that's pretty good. I mean, we sort of have the complete game right here. So you can start blowing up little asteroids everywhere, start moving around. New asteroids will soon appear off like every 8 to 12 seconds somewhere here. Yeah, there we go. New asteroids. So that's kind of a nice game. There's a few things that we can improve about this. First, let's have the score start disappearing, because really, it's kind of nice if the player can just sort of slowly take their time. Oops. Slowly take their time and be sure to hit each asteroid one at a time, because if you just start blasting randomly, you'll have all these little chunks flying everywhere that you don't want to really deal with. But if you are able to take your time, then you can sort of pick them off one by one and leave the giant ones alone until you're ready to deal with them. But we want to force the player to have to deal with them right now. We can do that by just decreasing the score every second. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new when green flag is clicked to the UFO sprite and add a forever loop under that. And let's just say, let's have it wait 1 second here and then decrease score by 1. So change what will be the score variable by -1. That will subtract 1 from the score variable. Of course, that doesn't really do anything except just decrease this number. Let's also have it so that if score is ever 0, that will cause a game over to happen. So first, we're going to have to paint a new sprite. We'll create a brand new sprite that this will be our sort of game over text. I'm going to switch to vector mode and click on the T text tool and just type game over. Maybe make it red. Or actually, let's just have it say out of time. And make this really big. Just grab one of the corners right here and resize it. That's pretty good. I'll just move this around so it appears right there. So this is a brand new sprite. We don't want it to show up at the very start of the program, so let's add this when green flag is clicked, and then from the purple look section, just hide it. And let's have it only show up when a message is broadcasted. So let's go back to the UFO sprite. So here we have scores decreasing by 1, and then if the score is ever equal to 0, we'll broadcast a message that makes out of time appear. So first is the if block from the yellow control section. When if the score is ever equal, so we need this equal operator from the green operator section. And then the score variable bubble we can grab from the orange data section. So if score is ever equal to 0, we'll just broadcast a message. And we can do that from the brown events category. Grab broadcast and wait. we'll make this a new message that says, we'll just call it out of time. Its name is out of time. Okay. And the out of time sprite, this code is pretty simple, so it just hides itself at the very beginning of the program, and then it just waits until it receives that out of time message. Select out of time. At that point, it'll just show itself. And we can go ahead and have it end the program right there also. So grab this stop all block from the yellow control section. So we can just test that out. Score is slowly decreasing itself. 2, 1, and then I'll just say out of time once it hits 0. So that'll force the player to keep shooting asteroids so that the score increases. The next thing that we want to do is, it's really easy just to sit in one place, because once you start moving around, it gets kind of hard to control the UFO, because you have to sort of decelerate and brake and change direction and everything. So it'd be kind of nice to just make it a little more challenging for the player if we sort of have random pushes to the UFO, just very small ones, but just enough to ensure that the UFO can't just stay in the same place all the time. So let's go to the UFO code. Right here, let's just say, grab this from the orange data section. Let's just change those X and Y velocity variables by a small amount. We'll grab 2 of these and set one to X velocity and set one to Y velocity. We'll just have it be a random number. So I'm going to go to the green operators category and grab this pick random. But just like we had for the asteroids, where we had a larger number and divided it by 10, so that way we got a finer, more granular number. Let's go back to the UFO. I'm going to grab the division operator and we can also make this, well, we don't want it to be -30. Well, let's just say anywhere between -4 and 4, and then have that divided by 4. So if it's -4, it'll actually be -1, because -4 divided by 4 is -1, and then +4 divided by 4 is 1. So this will be some number actually between -1 and 1, which isn't a lot, but that we only want a small, just random pushing that happens. So I'll duplicate that and set that inside here also. So now I can't just sort of, whoops. So now I can't just stay right here in the center of the screen unmoving. I'm always getting these sort of random pushes that I have to adjust to, which makes the game a little bit more challenging. And then there's one last thing. A friend of mine pointed this out once they were testing this game. So you can keep firing even after you've exploded in that 2 seconds until the program ends. And that's sort of weird that, you know, even though the UFO is exploded, you can still fire. So instead, let's create a variable that keeps track of if the UFO is alive or not, and then you can only fire if that variable says you're alive. So I'm going to go to the orange data section. I'm going to create a variable. It can be for all sprites. We'll just call it isAlive. And at the very start of the game, just right here underneath the show for the UFO sprite, we'll just say, we'll set isAlive to yes. And then scroll all the way to the bottom, and right after it explodes by touching an asteroid, we'll change isAlive by setting it to no. Is that right? Yeah. And then in the ball sprite, right here where it says when space key is pressed, this is where it starts creating clones of those energy balls that shoot out. Right now it just happens every time the space key is pressed, but we can change that by adding an if block here. So now we can change it so that if the isAlive variable is set to yes, then it'll create a clone of itself. So if isAlive is set to no, then it'll just skip this if block and do nothing. So I'm going to need this equal operator from the green operator section. And then from the orange data section, grab this is alive. So if is alive is yes, then it will create clones, and the clones will then start shooting themselves out. I'm going to just click on the green flag and see is alive is set to yes, which means I can actually start firing. And then once I'm alive, I can keep pressing the space key, but since is alive is set to no, this create clone of myself block gets skipped because this condition isn't true. And I'll just uncheck that. All we need is the score to be visible. And that's the entire game. You have basically just, yeah, a little UFO that floats around. The UFO and the asteroids and the energy beams can all wrap around the screen. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And new asteroids keep coming around all the time, and a little explosion plays if you ever get blown up. So go ahead and try this game out, tell me what you think, and if you have any questions, just leave a question in the comments section for this video. But thanks for watching.